Hello, everyone. I'm Corey Whitney. You've met me a few times in the meetings and seen me on the Slack channels. I'm going to be talking to you today about this whole idea of peer review in this course and how it is that we expect to be going about simulating a peer review process as part of your writing experience. This is something that not a lot of graduate level academics have a chance to go through. So we're really excited to be able to run through this with you. And we hope that you get a lot out of it and that you have some experience with the review process before we send you out into the wild as scientists. That's the background here. So I'm going to go through sort of some considerations for the peer review process, talk about some of the logistics for this particular process of peer review in this course, and talk about just briefly some ethics for fun. Talk about some ethical questions regarding peer review and writing. So, what is peer review? It is a way for us to help each other and our field, and it's a way to provide feedback for authors, help for journals, and a filter for bad work. These are there are many other aspects to peer review than what you'll hear in this particular talk. These are my ideas, what I've taken away so far. But the way we approach peer review can be helpful for lots of different communities, and including both authors, journals, and the research field as a whole. So the idea of when we're reviewing, we should of course look for good writing style with active voice, simple voice. The thing about, so I'm linking here to a work by Powell in Nature in 2012. I'll send you the link for that as well as part of this video. Please do have a look at that. It's quite an accessible short piece, and it really helps with thinking about how to assess the written language, especially in English. It is much simpler than most other languages. That's why we native English speakers have a lot of trouble adjusting or trying to learn new languages, because it's always a step up. But it's quite nice, I think, for science, because you have to say things in a clear way. So this is my this is of course from another publication from PLUS community. So this is an overview of the review process. So understanding how reviews work. Really, at first, here on the left-hand side, you select a journal. You prepare your manuscript according to that journal's requirements. Submit that manuscript to the journal. It goes through a peer review process and is possibly rejected. There may be another step here where after it goes directly from submission to rejection. And that's really a benefit in many ways. You should see that as a boon in your process, because rather than go through a whole peer review and then get a rejection, a desk rejection can be quick, and you can quickly choose a new journal and submit again. It can be hard. We've all suffered through rejection. It can be hard, but it's something to get used to and even hopefully get somewhat comfortable with. It will occur to you unless you're an exceptionally lucky scientist. Rejection is part of the work here. But if it doesn't get rejected, then we move here into the green part of our figure here, where it goes to it becomes accepted. There's a copy editing phase, a proofreading phase, and a publishing final publishing phase. So it's really important what we've experienced recently, and I think a lot of us have experienced several times in the past also, is that after acceptance, you're not completed your work with your co-authors. So once it's accepted, make sure your co-authors are part of the process in the copy editing and proofreading phases. The copy editors will send you a version, and you should make sure that your co-authors are on board with that to catch any final grammatical errors or other issues with the manuscript. And that's also true in the submission process. Definitely always make sure that all your co-authors are fully aware of the process of submission, that they've been involved in the manuscript preparation. We'll talk more about co-authorship soon. I'll talk about the pitfalls, potential pitfalls, and how to deal with reviewers, and share some personal stories and experiences. I would like for you, or I'd like us all to try to be the reviewer that we would like to have. That means to be nice, to be constructive about someone else's work, and to be the reviewee that you would like to support. That is in the response to the reviewer's comments. You want to hear a response to your comments that are humble and thorough. They took you seriously. They did a good job trying to incorporate your work. It's not peer review, if you can read this joke from Cartoon Stock. It's peer review, so we're not just complimenting each other. We are trying to provide useful feedback on our work. So there are different types of peer review. That's something to keep in mind. There's something called the blind peer review. There's a double blind, and there's a published. So in the single blind peer review process, the reviewers know that you're the author, but you don't know who the reviewers are. In the double blind, reviewers don't know that you are the author of the article, and you don't know who the reviewers are either. And in the published peer review process, everything is totally transparent with the option or non-option. Maybe you just have to publish your review. I've been involved in just one of those, but that is quite nice in many ways, because it's really transparent to the whole community. They can see who said what and what was changed. And this is a very unfriendly take on the peer review process. So sometimes reviewers can be really, really rough on their colleagues when they review papers, and it can be pretty painful. So again, we should try to be the reviewer that we would like to have, someone who's kind and who takes your work seriously, gives you constructive feedback. There are many benefits to peer review. So these are some things that I've said during the peer review process, and I meant them really. After peer review, I said, the assessment has been updated with the reviewer's suggestions, so they helped with the assessment. We were not aware of these resources. That means the peer review process gave us new important papers or citations that we could add to our work. The paper is stronger. That means after the peer review process, the paper was actually better than before, and we're grateful for the reviewer's feedback. That means really we felt that in the peer review process, we actually learned something, and it helped us a lot. And we meant all those things, as I said. So I'm not going to make you suffer through this this interview right now, but it is what I call cringe-worthy. It's the story, a book was published by an author, Naomi Wolf, and she learned actually in this interview, I recommend that you hear it, that what she was reporting on, homosexual people being murdered or killed by the state for homosexuality, was actually an incorrect understanding of what this term death recorded meant in legalese in the 19th century. So they weren't actually killed, but rather were pardoned. And she learns this not as part of the peer review process, which hopefully would happen to any scientist publishing work in the scientific process, but rather she learns this in a radio interview with a host who was careful enough to review the historical background of the stories that she told in her book. So that's a cautionary tale. But there are a lot of limitations of peer review. There are lengthy delays, can often cause really lengthy delays in the dissemination of research findings. So some people prefer to go with no peer review process. That is, they prefer to go directly to open access online repositories for data, or papers or other things, archives. It can be really time consuming. It places a lot of demands on the academic community. Those of us at the Horticulture Institute, you'll find, are very active in the research community in terms of doing peer reviews, and it takes up a lot of our time. It's important, but it does place a lot of demand. And sometimes when people are not doing this in good faith, that is, sometimes when we're not being the reviewers that we would like to have, but rather more aggressive and sort of trying to take down our colleagues in the review process, as you saw in that comic earlier, the articles can read as a defensive response. So you may end up reading an article that doesn't really sound like it's the author's enthusiastic report, but rather the author's trying to defend the work that they have presented. You may end up feeling like this guy here. So you're going to prepare for peer review. We're not going to ask you to respond to the peer review process. There isn't really time for that. And I know you're already quite overwhelmed with all of the work that we've given you for this course. I hope you're learning a lot. We know it's a lot. So we're asking you just to prepare for peer review and to offer a peer review of your colleagues' work. So you've got about 2 weeks to complete the draft of your manuscript. By the 23rd, you will share the manuscript and any supplementary materials so that your colleagues can review what you've done. And I recommend you name this file, just to keep track of files here. Just name that file authorgroup.doc. We can probably share that via Slack. I'll have more specific information on that in the meeting about how that can be shared exactly, but your tutors and I will find a way to distribute these to your reviewers. So again, by the 23rd, share that manuscript and any supplementary materials in a file for the peer review. When you are submitting a paper to a journal, you may need a lot of different documents for that manuscript submission. So you're going to need more than what you'll provide for us today or during this course. In a peer review process, you will be required to supply generally a cover letter, the manuscript file, including a title page, an abstract, keywords, texts, all of the text of the file, acknowledgements, tables, references, table of contents, and figures and legends are often supplied separately. You may or may not be required to provide that point number 3 table of contents. And any supplementary materials will also need to be provided in that submission, or if you've already published those or have them in a data repository, then you can refer to that data repository. But it has to be accessible to the reviewers, and all of the contact information for the primary authors of the paper will also need to be provided in that submission. So you'll have, once those manuscripts have been provided, your team will have until the 30th to complete a set of revisions. So you'll read and review the manuscript that was provided, give some clear written feedback, and share that. And then I recommend, again, just for clarity of documentation, keep their author group name and then just add reviewer group name. I'm subjecting you to my favorite style of naming files, where I always put my initials at the end if I've reviewed something. So just put your reviewer group name here at the end. You know your name, it's in your Slack channel, Tomato1, etc. Put that there at the end so we know it's been reviewed and which group reviewed it, and we'll find a way to get those back to the original authors. So again, we're not requiring you to respond, but I just want to give you the overview of how that looks when you do respond. So when you're responding to peer review comments, you should be humble. Again, be the reviewee that you would like to have, someone who takes you seriously and someone who is humble about their work. So this is a Twitter post from Leila Sturgis, a researcher I follow. And her takeaway from this whole review process, or from being a good scientist, is to say things like, I don't know the answer to that, or I didn't know that, I was wrong, I changed my mind after thinking about what you said. They're useful phrases, certainly in science, and they also potentially make you a better person. You can get a black belt in humility if you practice these things. So these are all really helpful for the review process. Not only humble, but also we should be thorough. So Grace Lavery, another researcher I follow, said after hearing the interview with Naomi Wolf that I shared earlier, Grace Lavery said, I really hope that when, not if, my work is corrected publicly on a matter of fact, I handle it with as much grace as Naomi Wolf. She was really impressed by her curiosity about the new information and unwillingness to deflect it. So you'll hear again in that interview, cringeworthy interview, as I've said, that she's actually really curious, and she tries to follow up with the even though it must be incredibly embarrassing, she still tries to find out more, and instead of deflecting or trying to defend herself. Again, a link to another paper, this one by William Stafford Noble, plus advice on the revision process. I recommend that you follow up there. I'll share the link in the notes. When we're responding to reviewers, you should give, first of all, this is a standard format. You should give an overview, so add a quick summary right at the top of any changes that you made, new data, new analyses, etc., and just a summary of the major changes, and make sure that in the rest of the document you include all the feedback and criticisms raised by the reviewers. You should be respectful, so give the benefit of the doubt. Maybe if it may seem as though they didn't understand, but it may in fact be just that you weren't very clear in how you formulated the idea. So did they reveal, maybe they helped you to understand that there's some lack of clarity somewhere. If there are any major issues, that is, if they have said something that you think is unreasonable, required something of you that you think is unreasonable, and you don't feel comfortable doing that right in the actual response document, you can communicate to the editor. It should generally be possible to do all of that work in the actual response document. Response document is sometimes called rebuttal, but we just call it here. Mostly we just say response to reviewers. Sounds a little bit less aggressive. Quote any changes. So keep their original language and then add your responses to that. Make it easy in this process. Make it easy for people to see what you've done by including maybe even the actual changes in your response letter. Can get to be a really long letter, but it's also really nice for a reviewer to remember what they told you, and then see right away in the actual document where you respond to see what you did, what you changed. And make sure to respond to everything. Don't ignore any of the issues, respond to each one. These may seem pretty straightforward, but we see these kind of issues all the time in the review process. And again, being respectful, going back to that point, sometimes people think, oh, everyone's equal, of course, but not reviewer two. Reviewer two read my paper and they just did not understand it at all because they're obviously somehow not as good as the rest of us. So that's not true. They try to give them the benefit of the doubt. Make the response document easy to navigate. Use a different font color or better indentation or bullets. Use sections to make it clear where you're talking about new areas of your paper and which reviewer you're responding to. Make it easy to navigate. Give really direct answers. Provide a yes or no, and then follow up right there. Don't say, thanks very much for this excellent question because, and actually at the end of this long narration of your introduction to your response, you don't do what they said. Just say, we made the change, we did not make the change, and then tell them why. Take them seriously. make sure, just be totally clear. If you think the changes are outside of the scope of your work, then say that. And again, in rare cases where there's uncertainty, you can contact the editor. The editors among us in our team of teachers here will probably not like will not like that I put those points in about consulting the editor, but sometimes it is necessary. Generally, you can work it out directly with the reviewer. So again, be clear about the changes and refer explicitly to the previous versions and explain what was changed. Make sure there's a track change document that they can access and find the changes. So one more thing I want to slip in here into this process. There's going to be a question about authorship. There always is on every paper. Whose name goes where? In economics, generally, it's really straightforward, and it's so easy because the names just go alphabetically. But in many other fields, including ours, the fields that most of us are working in, authorship has an order that means something about the work that each of the, or is assumed to mean something about the work that each of the co-authors put into the paper. This is something, again, that most people never have a chance during their graduate studies to really discuss formally. So I recommend that you do engage in this idea and make that a transparent discussion. When you're talking about authorship, whose name goes where, it acknowledges the scientific and professional contribution of each person who worked on the paper. So discuss it early. Try to lay out some ground rules for what constitutes contribution and discuss it at regular intervals or during any major developments. And finally, this one is not often acknowledged, but your feelings are valid and they should be discussed clearly and consistently. What can really help with these discussions is if you do refer to some official criteria for authorship. So the American Psychological Association has a guideline, and they also have a research responsibilities checklist. This can be a good go-to for just getting some basic ground rules and also maybe getting some of the emotion out of the talk, just using some standardized lists. So again, I just wanted to slip some little extra things in here. Here's some stuff on research ethics. So when we're doing research, we definitely need to follow ethical guidelines. The University of Bonn has a set of ethics, as do most of the research institutes within the University of Bonn and most of the research institutes that you will be collaborating with in your career. But they generally require honesty, integrity, openness, confidentiality, etc., and no discrimination. So really the reason that we have sort of standardized ethical guidelines is that scientific work can advance truth and knowledge, truth with a little t. We try to learn as much as we can and always to be growing and learning more. And we need to have accountability and trust in overall fairness. So we want to try to create work that's useful to the wider community and also fair to those who are participating in it. That's what I said before. Universities and institutions, all the groups that you'll be working with have their own specific codes. Find out what those are, look those up, make sure you're following along in those things. Another issue in the ethics of research and of publishing is the issue of plagiarism. So there are some tools for mitigating plagiarism. Just so you've heard it, I guess I'm hoping that you've heard this in other courses as well, but there are several types of plagiarism. There's direct plagiarism. That is when you take someone else's work and pretend that it's yours. There's self-plagiarism. That's when you take parts of work that you've already published and you try to publish them again. There's mosaic plagiarism, that is copying the process or the style of someone else's work and pretending it's yours. And there's accidental plagiarism, that is not remembering that you've copied something or something like this. There are many other types of plagiarism. but keep those in mind and do be very cautious that you don't. It could derail a career. In the United States, if a student is caught doing any kind of plagiarism, they're expelled from that university, no longer allowed to study. So do keep in mind, plagiarism is a major issue. Here in Germany, there have been a number of high-level cases in Europe as well, and in the United States, they happen all the time, of course. Plagiarism is a big deal. So 2 case studies for discussion on research ethics, just hopefully to spark a discussion in the group. Case number 1, there's a research protocol for a study on drug hypertension, and it requires the administration of the drug with chemical and behavioral tests to determine toxic effects. Tom has only 5 mice left to test. However, he really wants to finish his work in time to go on vacation. He has not completed all of the tests. He therefore decides to extrapolate from the 45 completed results to produce the 5 additional results. Is Tom justified in his decision? Should he go ahead with that? Is it wrong for Tom to extrapolate from the 45 cases to produce the extra 5? And the second case, Dr. T, it's the cousin of Mr. T, if you know that guy. So Dr. T has just discovered a mathematical error in his paper. The paper's already been accepted for publication. The error does not affect the overall results of his research, but it is potentially misleading. The journal just went to press, so it's too late to catch the error before it appears in print. In order to avoid embarrassment, Dr. T decides to ignore the error. Is this wrong? Should Dr. T do something more dramatic? Does this warrant some other major change? Or should Dr. T just leave it as is and go on with his life? So that's the end of my presentation to you guys on this topic. I do hope that you understood, and I'll be available for any questions on this. Please feel free to get in touch if there are any issues, and I look forward to reading or to seeing what it is that you guys come up with. Thanks very much.